today. In fact, you got the geomancy book. Let me see that for a second. One of the books that the whiteys are marketing now is a book called Geomancy. Okay? And this is the new book that just came out recently by Nigel Pennant. This is a British European who put out this book. And as you can see on the front cover, that's a picture of part of Stonehenge. I'm sorry, part of the area near Stonehenge. And these kind of megaliths, they're called megaliths, you can find these all over England, all over France, Germany, all over the place. In fact, I'm going to try to briefly spend some time on some of the megaliths they just found in France. Any of y'all ever heard of Nexus magazine? Nexus? By the way, Nexus is going to stop publication in this country, distribution in this country very soon, because the people who distributes it out of New York has been told they're no distribute that magazine out of New York. They will only be able to get it from now on out of Australia, where it's published. And that's because there's been a lot of pressure by the government and other sources to get rid of that magazine. Okay, that magazine, another one called Perceptions. And you all ever heard of Perceptions? Okay, it's a very similar magazine where a lot of underground material is starting to come out through these magazines, and they are busy trying to find ways to crush these magazines because the information is too hot, it's too valuable. They spend a lot of time in these magazines talking about some of this kind of stuff, and they always have authors who the quote establishment calls quacks in these magazines kicking this stuff out heavy. Some of these people have been threatened. Some of them have had their houses blown up. There's one guy in there who was attacked by a black helicopter. He blew up his next door neighbor's house. He was trying to get his house. It was a foggy day. They missed the right house, hit the wrong house, which is identical twin to his, and blew the next door neighbor's house up trying to get him. So there's all kind of weird stuff going on, but these people are still pumping out a tremendous amount of information, and there's going to be a whole lot more information being kicked out because they can't stop the flow. You can't stop nature. You know, just like you got to eat, you got to sleep, and you got to go to the bathroom, well, the planet is doing the same thing. And the people on this earth, all, regardless of what continent they live on, all of them are moving in the same general direction. And you have your rebels or your brigands or your renegades that are trying to throw all kinds of monkey wrenches in the way to stop us from coming into the true nature of this planet. But that's the law of nature. Part of the law of nature on this planet is resistance, friction. And the friction is very serious now, but I can promise you right now they're not going to be able to stop the kind of unmasking of the truth that's going on everywhere now. A whole lot of people are getting pushed off to the side and being hurt in the process, but that's not going to stop what's coming down the pipe. Now, before I start this lecture, I do want to say that I think it's very important that you maintain a positive attitude on the future, that you believe very firmly in the concept of hope. Hope is very, very important, because I'm going to say some things tonight that's going to shake you up pretty bad, and you're going to wonder whether or not there's anything left to worry about, to think about, or even function for. Because the kind of times we're getting ready to come up with, and I'm going to deal with the last part of this lecture, I'm going to deal with some of the things that are going to be happening from January to March. It's going to be a real, quote, bad time, unquote, across the board. It's going to be tough, rough. And a lot of people who are not ready to deal with this kind of stuff that's coming down the pipe are going to get hurt. If you think in Western, if your mind and your energy is Western-oriented, which means that it's linear, you're going to get hurt the most. If your mind is Eastern, okay, if you're holistic thinking, then you will get hurt the least. But everybody's going to suffer, and everybody's going to share in the pain. And we're going to see a tremendous amount of this kind of stuff coming up in another few weeks. That when the solstice comes in, you're going to see certain types of signals coming up that are going to indicate what's going to be happening through the beginning of next year and going into the next 3 years. Because the next 3 years on this planet is going to be pure hell for those who are not ready to deal with it. So if you're not conscious, if you're not awoke, if you're not studying, if you're not really burning the midnight oil to get a grip on yourself and get a grip on what this whole entire planet is all about, what the society is about, why there's an Eastern and a Western philosophy, then you're going to get hurt real, real bad. And you're going to be crying and running to somebody for help. And it might be too late by then. Okay? So you need to, if you're in the process of trying to wake yourself up, then that helps a whole lot. You know, for instance, if you're dealing with the right kind of foods, that's a big, big help. If you're getting off bloody stuff, like Phil Valentine says, get away from the stuff with two eyes. You know, that's very helpful. You know, changing of your diet, radical changes of your diet is a big plus. But that's only a small part of it. You got to get into herbs too. Because if you're just dealing with proper foods, vegetables, you know, there's worms in vegetables just like there's worms in meat. Okay, and those same kind of worms that are in the vegetables can slow you down just like they can in the meat. They don't talk about the worms in the vegetables and the fruit because that's a whole new fad now. But the only way you can deal with all that stuff, you got to get into the herbs. If you don't deal with the herbs, then all of that other is a waste of time. You're not going to be able to get into a certain type of consciousness that you're going to need to survive. Okay? So, dealing with proper food is a big plus. Dealing with proper herbs is a big plus. Okay? And getting away from negative thinking patterns, that's a big plus. All those kind of little things will help you maintain your sanity, okay, at this juncture. Because you're seeing more and more and more of our people going insane. Okay? And that's not your imagination when you say, well, it seems like there's a few more nuts out there. Okay? There are, in fact, more, quote, nuts out there because these are folks who cannot deal with the stress of these times. And because they lack the understanding and they lack the communications to be able to come in contact with conscious folks, they lose it. Okay? But all those folks can be brought back too. You know, white folks run around saying that all niggas are schizoid and there's nothing you can do with them but give them some pills, some Thorazine and some other drugs, lithium and that kind of thing. But where there's hope, there's always success. It's very, very important. Wherever I go now, I always tell people, especially younger people, no matter what happens, you've got to keep the focus on hope. Because black people on this planet, African people on this planet, we are a part of nature. We are an integral part of the planet. So what happens to the planet is going to happen to us. Regardless of what happens to those other folks, whatever happens to the planet is happening to us. So if the planet is suffering, if the planet's in pain right now, if the planet is going through catharsis right now, if it's basically throwing up all the poisons, then we're doing the same thing. We're in tandem with the planet. Okay? We move as it moves. The planet go left, we go left. The planet go right, we go right. That's something you don't even have any control over. That's automatic pilot. Okay? No matter what the mother folks are doing, usually it's the other way around with them. If the planet go left, they go right. And vice versa. And that's why things is all screwed up now. But they was put here for a reason. Okay? A cosmic reason. And just like you were put here for a cosmic reason in terms of assisting the planet, believe it or not, they were put here for a cosmic reason to assist the planet too. That sounds weird, but in the final analysis, if you look at it in 360 degrees total, then you will be able to figure out, even mathematically, that they're here for an ultimately positive purpose too. Their purpose is destroy and destruct. That's their immediate function, destroy. Dismember, take apart, confuse, refuse, abuse. But ultimately, it's all for good purpose. And ultimately, it all comes together. It fuses together into one cosmic understanding, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. Okay, a little bit. But before we get into all that stuff, I want to get into a little bit of this grid stuff. The last time I was at Phil, I was real frustrated because I didn't even get into the main piece of material about the grids. And me and the sister talked about it, and she was saying that she had a little bit of frustration. But I understood Phil's schedule was real tight, and it was like 1,000 speakers, so, you know, we only get so much time. And I respect that. The fact that Phil brought me in, to me, is a commendable thing, because normal people in Philadelphia don't ask me to speak nowhere. Okay? Because my history is one of turning things out and, you know, rocking the boat and being a rebel and a troublemaker, you know. And I'm very proud of that tradition, because I think that if you're not starting trouble and if you're not rocking the boat, then there's something wrong with you. Okay? That's the way I look at it. I don't know about anybody else. Okay? So I want to thank Phil Valentine. I hope he sees this tape, because I want to thank you, Phil, for letting me come into Brooklyn. I always wanted to speak in Brooklyn. That was a lifelong dream, because Brooklyn is out there. Okay? But now I even feel better, because I'm only up the street from the Apollo. And when we was coming in the van, everybody's eyes lit up. When I said Apollo, and everybody, bing, bing, bing. Damn, we really in New York now. So I'm very privileged and very happy and very proud to be not just in New York, but in Harlem. Because in Harlem, that's the beginning of almost everything here, you know, in this country. All the greats came out of Harlem. Those that didn't come out of North Philly. But I also want to thank the Ethiopian Coptic Church, because I think it's a very brave and heroic act on their part to even have these kind of things in their building. Because there are other places around the country where, you know, they just go and burn something down that they don't like. You know, they go torch churches wherever they want. These days, nobody's stopping them now. So I think it's a commendable effort for this church to have us in here. And again, you want to keep in mind always the perspective, because everything began in East Africa, in Ethiopia. That's where all of it began. You know, we had debates back in Philly all the time about all these different religions around the world. Where did they come from? Okay? They came from East Africa, and they specifically came out of Ethiopia. You're talking about Islam, you're talking about Ethiopia. You're talking about Christianity, you're talking about Ethiopia. If you're talking about Judaism, you're talking about Ethiopia. In fact, just recently, the so-called Jews up there in so-called Israel, they were so determined to get some real soul that they sent planes over to Africa and kidnapped whole gugabs, Africans, and flew them back in the so-called Israel. Isn't that right? Okay, because they needed that soul force, and now there's a lot of trouble coming out of that. A lot of trouble in that land because of what they did, and it's going to come back on them. What they did is going to come back on them. They're going to pay for that. Okay? Because, see, whenever you introduce us into a hostile situation anywhere on the planet, believe me, you're going to pay. Because when we get hostile, we redefine the term. Just look at us here. You know, these crackers here are very, very sorry that they ever brought us in here. And now they're going through the process of trying to get rid of us. So they bring in AIDS, they bring in Ebola, they bring in crack. You know, Dick Gregory and Maxine Waters are running around the country now talking about what the CIA did, which everybody knew before. Okay? So they've introduced all these kind of killer-type syndromes to try to get rid of us, because now it's dawning on them once again that there's too many of us here. We breathe too fast, and they got to do something fast if they want to survive, because they don't breathe. All right? So the math is not working in their favor. Okay? So they got to work as fast as they can, you know, burn out their computers to try to undo what they've done. But there's a cosmic power at work here. And see, they think that because they're linear, they think it's just a process of going and sending out some bugs or going and sending out some drugs to do the job, because they see us as simply flesh and blood and bones. But they don't understand, because they're linear, they don't understand it's a lot more complicated than that. And if you want to decide that you're going to go wipe a whole people off the face of the earth, then they don't understand there's a process that they have to go through to get that done, or it don't get done. In other words, if they cannot get permission from the ancestors to wipe us off the face of the earth, then it's not going to be done no matter what they got. And that's the situation we're in right now. You know, we're in a situation where these people are trying very, very hard to burn the midnight oil, to stand up 25 hours a day, to get us out of here, but it's not quite working because they don't have the authority or the permission or the power to be able to do what they want to do. So they can sit and dream all the nightmares they want. They're not going to be able to get this done. If they could get it done, they would have went to Africa and removed every man, woman, and child centuries ago. Okay? They had the type of machinery that should have been able to do that a long time ago. But yet Africa is actually thriving. Africa right now, population-wise, is the fastest growing continent on the planet. Lagos in Nigeria will double its size in less than 25 years. They can't figure out the math for that. But it's happening anyway, despite all the machines, all the computers, all the calculations, and it happens here too. It happens everywhere in the third world where you get that melanin. Wherever you got that black dot, okay, you got a headache for them. Okay? Now they got the melatonin out to try to tap into the black dot. And some of them used to even go so far as go lay out on the beaches and try to burn themselves up and get all black. But then they found out they catch cancer too fast. So they had to run away from the sun. Okay, especially the redheads. The redheads catch cancer very fast. Then the blondes, then the brunettes. Okay, the blacker they get, the safer they are. The whiter they get, the worse they get. No, that's laws. That's the laws of nature. That's physics. That's chemistry. That ain't no makeup stuff. They know that in their laboratories. That's why they always tell their redheads, do not get in the sun. No, that ain't no joke. They tell the redheads, redheaded people cannot get in the sun because they burn up. They catch cancer quick. Okay? So if Kennedy wasn't going to die of a bullet wound, all right, let me stop. Now, what I want to concentrate on right now, okay, I don't want to go through this whole grid map because I don't have the time. It's already 9:30. What I want to do instead is concentrate on one single part of that map, okay? And that is this line. You see this line right here? Okay, this line is what I'm going to talk about tonight. Part of my talk is going to be about that tonight. Like I said, I'm only going to spend a third of my time on this because I think at this point in time it's much more important to get to what's going to be happening next year. Because if you can't get a focus, if you can't get a fix on what's coming down the pipe, then you're going to get wrecked. And certain ones of us are here to try to help disseminate information that we have. You can take it or leave it for what it's worth. If you don't want it, fine, no problem. But certain ones of us are commissioned to disseminate certain types of information, and some of the stuff that's going to be coming up is going to be important for you to hear. But in the meantime, I want to deal with this line right here. This whole map here is what you call a grid map. Okay? And all these intersections along this map, you see these little dots here, okay, these are called nodals. These are what the white people now call nodals. N-O-D-O-L-S. Okay? Now, these white folks have tapped into sciences that we've known about for hundreds of thousands of years, going back before the time of Atlantis. Okay, because there was a time going back to Atlantis, and there was a time before that too, when we was here. Okay? These whiteys won't even admit that there was an Atlantis. They can't even go back 50,000 years because they wasn't here. And they have no reference point before that. So therefore, they dismiss any history that exists before that. That's why they will never acknowledge the existence of an Atlantis or a Lemuria, because they wasn't there. Their kind didn't exist at that time. Their only recent arrivals, they arrived here about 25 to 35,000 years ago. For the million or so years before that, we was ruling this whole planet. In fact, not only this planet, but the whole solar system. You have a lot of whiteys running around talking about, well, there's UFOs now, Palladians. Y'all heard that. Palladians running all over the planet now, getting ready to make their move. The problem that I have with Palladians, and I told Al Bielek this on my radio show. Y'all know Al Bielek? Al Bielek is supposed to be the most famous man in the UFO community because that's the guy who ran through the Philadelphia experiment. Y'all saw the movie, Philadelphia experiment? Okay, the guy who was portrayed in that movie is a guy named Al Bielek, okay, who went back and forth through time, and now he's running all over the country making tons of dollars talking about how he met the UFOs and the ETs. The only problem I had with him on my radio show was that he talked about them Palladians. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, Al. Whoa, hold it right there. What color are they? Blonde hair and blue eyes. I said, okay, well, you got to kill that. Okay? Unless you can talk about the black ones, I don't want to hear it. So I asked him, I said, did you see Buckaroo Banzai? He said, what? This guy's a PhD in physics. I said, did you see Buckaroo Banzai? He said, what? Scrunched his face all up. I said, no, I'm serious. Because if you saw Buckaroo Banzai, then you saw the sister who came from the stars to the President of the United States and told the President of the United States that unless he acceded to her wishes, that she was going to zap them and the Russians together. Okay? So he said, no, I ain't never heard of that. I said, I guess not, because you're talking about some blonde-haired, blue-eyed Palladians. Those are fringe elements. I get in fights with brothers back in Philly all the time that's into this UFO stuff who are sucking up this Palladian nonsense. The Palladians are from a star system called TAOS. For those of y'all who know the stars, constellations, supposedly, right? But then I asked Al Bielek, I said, did you ever see Brother from Another Planet? And y'all ever seen that? Brother from Another Planet. If y'all ain't got that tape, go to Blockbuster and get it. If you ain't got Buckaroo Banzai, go to the store and get it. And learn some African history. Sun Ra talked about it years ago, before he left here. Everybody said Sun Ra was nuts. Sun Ra knew what he was talking about. But Sun Ra was talking about them Africans that's up there. Now they all running around talking about what's on Mars. The pyramids they found on Mars and the Sphinx on Mars. The whole city they found up there on Mars. So Al Bielek was at a UFO conference in Philly last week, and I heard him and Preston Nichols, the other guy who was up there in Montauk with him, and they talked about, you know, how these people came down here and taught the Earth civilizations what they knew. You know, but every time Al Bielek see me, he'd go the other way. And when I asked Preston Nichols about it, you know, he clammed up. I had the tape recorder in his face because I wanted to trip him up on the tape. He said, turn that thing off. And I said, okay, no problem. I had no problem. All y'all white folks running around talking about these blind-haired, blue-eyed ETs. But until y'all learn the real ETs, y'all ain't got no plan. Okay? Because the real ETs are dealing with the same situation we got here. Okay? There's a brother named Sims, just wrote a book called Zone, Z-O-E-N. It's a science fiction novel by William Sims out of Philadelphia. I'm sure it's available up here in all the bookstores. Get that book. It'll tell you the real history. Brother's gifted. It'll tell you the real history of them ETs. Well, none of these white stores sell his book. I went to Borders a couple weeks ago and asked them, where you got Sims' book? They said, we don't carry that. I said, why not? You got a whole floor full of science fiction and not one copy of this brother's book. I said, well, y'all need to order that book and get a stack of it because those people talking about the real deal. All right? Now, let's get back to this map real quick before I get deviated too much on the ET nonsense. These points here are called nodals. The two major points on the grid map in North America are 2 points that the whiteys are now calling grid point number 17 and grid point number 18. Now, y'all familiar with the Bermuda Triangle? Okay, if you know about the Bermuda Triangle, if you don't know, go get some materials on it. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. This grid point right here, number 18, what they're calling number 18, and it's in this book. Okay, some of the stuff is in this book. And this book is good. I'm glad you brought this book, Mike, because this book has a reference in the back that has a complete listing. It's kind of ridiculous the way he got it lined up. Okay? You need a telescope to see this. Maybe he did that for a reason, I don't know. But this book has a complete listing of all the grid books, all of the geomancy books, the earth science books, okay, and there's some very, very good materials in here. It's about 200 or 300 listings on that one single page. So if you get this book here, this is a good start because it's a good reference book for this material if you want to get into this stuff real heavy. That's why I always recommend this book even though a European put it out. All right? Now, grid point number 18 deals with the Bermuda Triangle. Grid point number 17 deals with a place in Mexico called Sonora, the Sonora Desert. Okay? Now, how many of y'all saw Close Encounters? Okay, if you didn't see that movie, see, don't ever take science fiction movies lightly. Don't ever do that. because you're missing a lot of history if you do that. All right? Because Hollywood does not pump out billions of dollars every year for nothing. That is not entertainment. Okay? There's all kind of political messages that are siphoned through there. Okay? There's all sorts of heavy-duty stuff that goes through Hollywood. And that's why they pumping billions into that place. Don't ever take science fiction movies for granted, because in every single movie, no matter whether it's fiction, science fiction, detective, spy, whatever, there's always a kernel of truth in every single one of the movies. Whether it's labeled, you know, a true story or anything else. Okay? And that's part of the whole subliminal science that the Masons have. All right? But if you saw the movie Close Encounters, then you know about grid point number 17. Because in the opening of that movie opened in this desert. If you look, y'all can't see it from here, but if you get up later on and look at this, you'll see right here, it says Sonora. That's the province in Mexico, okay, the borders of the United States, borders of the state of Arizona in particular. It's called Sonora, okay? And when that movie opened up, they talked about the Sonora Desert, because there's a lot of funny stuff happening in Sonora, and it's because of this thing right here. This is what you call vortex. And this over here is what you call vortex. These are major vortexes. There's 66 of these around the planet. Africa has more than any other continent. There's only 2 in North America. There are 5 of these in Africa. And one day when I come back here, I'll bring the Africa maps with me. Okay, and I'll show you how Africa looks just like this, but 5 times the power. Okay? And the North American Indians, if you ever get with the native tribes, they'll be able to talk about all this stuff, because all the shamans know this stuff and known it for generations. Going all the way back to the Anasazi, okay, over here in the Mojave Desert. Okay, they've been there for 10, 20,000 years, and they know what's in that desert, and they know why all those military boys are down at Nellis Air Force Base now, where you have S4 and Delcy, okay, and Dreamland bases. All that top secret stuff where the Aurora came out of, and where the stealth bombers came out of, all that super top secret stuff that came out of the United States military came out of that desert. And the reason why it came out of this particular desert is no coincidence. It's because these whiteys here have been able to tap into these earth sciences with the help of training that they received from the Native Americans. And in some cases, they even went all the way to Africa and got with those shamans over there, because those shamans over there know the same thing that these shamans over here know. They communicate with each other, believe it or not. And that's why these people's culture is so close to our culture. If you ever go to a Native American museum, take some time. He knows what I'm going to say. Take some time and go to a Native American museum here in New York somewhere. Go to this, the Metropolitan, where they got a section on Native culture, and you'll be amazed to see the similarities between African culture and their culture. There's a whole lot of reasons for those similarities. One of the reasons is because we was over here a long time ago. Okay, we really never left. They brought some of us back over here in boats, but we was here the whole time. We was here long before the whiteys was ever here, and we was even here long before the natives was here, because the natives are from us. You know, years ago, if you get books on the natives and you study carefully enough, I've only seen this twice in all the hundreds of books that they have on Native American history. I've only seen twice. I saw one Blackfoot elder say that in the old days, all of them were black. Okay? All of them were black. And at one point, they was proud of their skin color. And as these invasions came over from Asia first and Europe second, they got bleached out, down to what they are now. Okay? And as they lost their pigmentation, their melanin, they lost their powers. And as they lost their powers, their defenses and their flanks was open, wide open. And that's when the Europeans came in and did their thing. These Europeans would have never been able to touch none of these native nations if those people had kept their melanin, because that melanin got power to it. That's why I keep saying that as much as they want to wipe out the continent of Africa so that they can resettle it, they'll never be able to do it. They'll never be able to do it because they need permission to do that. They don't get permission from our ancestors, they can't do it, and they never will be able to do it. Okay? But anyway, I can't concentrate on the whole map because the time's running too fast. But what I want to do on this grid stuff is concentrate on one single one of these lines. This one single line. that runs right through the heart of New York State. Now, I wanted to deal with this the last time I was at Phil's, but the time ran out, so I couldn't get to it. But now I'm going to take the time, skip all that other stuff, and get to it, because y'all New Yorkers. I'm sure you want to know about the Empire State and why they call it the Empire State. It's not called the Empire State because of the Empire State Building. No, a lot of people believe that. It's called the Empire State because the natives, when these crackers first came over here from Amsterdam, okay, they sat down with these elders first before they did anything. Because first of all, they were starving to death. And they didn't even have good sense to be able to survive off the roots. So the Indians had to teach them how to survive, number one. Then after they got their bellies full and they got their heads cleared, then they took out the time to sit down and talk to these folks and find out what they knew. Okay? And they found out that New York State, the area that is now called New York State, is one of the most esoteric areas of the whole entire United States of America. In fact, North America. The reason being, if you look at this map very closely, you'll see that right smack in the heart of New York State, what y'all call upstate, there's a nodal point. And I'm going to very briefly talk about where that point is at and what it is. There's New York State, and that nodal point connects to points all over this continent. Okay? And the main grid line between that nodal point in upstate New York and the nodal point that is in the Bermuda Triangle is the main line of the United States of America. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that all of the key kernels of American history straddle that line geographically. You can take American political history and plot it geographically along this line right here, this grid line, and all of it pops out right in your face. Now, I didn't bring some of my other map books that detail this stuff in great detail, but it suffices to say that if you can go through an early American history book, and you can follow this line out of the Bermuda Triangle going straight up to upstate New York. Now, it just so happens that right where that nodal point is at, there's an Indian tribe. Anybody know what it is? Anybody familiar with upstate? Okay, in that section of New York, there's an Indian reservation. Now, New York has more Indian reservations, believe it or not, than most states on the East Coast. Did you all know that? Okay, and that's because New York is not a Commonwealth state. In Pennsylvania, there's only one. There's only one Indian reservation, and it's about that big, okay, called the Allegheny Reservation, upstate Pennsylvania, okay? There's only a couple hundred people living on it, all right? And that's because Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, Massachusetts, some of them other states are what they call commonwealths. And those states are ruled by Quakers, okay, who were originally Dutch and German before they went to England, all right? And those people had their own Masonic order. The Quakers are their own Masonic order, separate from the Freemasons and all that other nonsense, okay? And those are their turfs. Those 6 states are the Commonwealths, are their private domains. And one of the rules that they laid down when they first came over here was that all those natives had to be wiped out because they did not want those sciences getting out. But in the other states like New York, they allowed those reservations to exist even to today. There's about 6 one of the big one of the biggest ones is a nation called the Onondaga. You ever heard of it? Yeah. There's one of them is called the Oneida. Yeah. One of them is called the Cayuga. One of them is called the Seneca. One of them is called the Onondaga. Another one is called the Mohawk. And these were once the what? Huh? They comprised what nation? Those 6 Indian nations conformed A federation. Who said that? Right, called the Iroquois. The Iroquois Confederation. Okay, the Iroquois, right. You guess where I was unfolding to. All right, the Iroquois Confederation was the model for the United States of America. It was the model, their Constitution, which was unwritten, was the model for the United States Constitution, because Ben Franklin and Jefferson and Washington and all those freaks back then ran up there all the time and sat down with those shamans and gleaned out of those people everything that they knew. Well, most of what they knew, because they only told them what they wanted to know. Okay? And they modeled the United States Constitution off a whole series of conferences that they had in upstate New York on the Onondaga Reservation. You never hear that. As far as you know, Ben Franklin was never in upstate New York talking to no Indians. But the fact is that if he hadn't talked to these Indians on the Onondaga Nation, which is part of the Iroquois Federation, there wouldn't have been no U.S. Constitution, because the British would have wiped them out. Okay? It was only because there were sciences that they were able to get from these people that they were able to bring the British to a halt. All right? Because they used Indian methods of warfare against the British, which the British were not equipped to deal with. The British fought European style, these people fought Indian style. And that's how they won that war. All right? And they went to New York State to get that information, because they knew from their Masonic backgrounds over in Europe and Scotland and England and Germany that if they came to certain places in North America and got with those people that lived at those particular places, then they would be able to beat the British and anybody else they wanted to beat. And that's why the United States of America today is the single most military power on the planet, next to China. Because they went to these people, thanks to people like Francis Bacon. You ever heard of him? Francis Bacon was one of the guys back in the 15th century who told William Penn's ancestors, if you want to go overseas and conquer that part of the world, you got to go here first. Go to these people first, and they will give you the secrets of the land. You get the secrets of the land, everything else follows. And that's what they did. When they came here, these people who landed at Plymouth, one of their major assignments was to somehow get into a colony in New York, get upstate New York, do whatever they had to do to talk to those people, even if it meant going to war. The first thing they did was they set the British against the French. And they hired certain parts of the Iroquois to go with the British and certain parts of the Iroquois to go with the French. As long as they had those people divided, then they had a route to get to the shamans and sit them down and start talking about these nodal points. Now right here in upstate New York, right there about 20 miles due south of Syracuse, is an Indian reservation called the Onondaga. Y'all can look this up in the books. I mean, any library got this stuff. The Onondaga. Now, the Onondaga in the old days were called the keepers of the Western Fire. Okay, the native nations called the Onondaga the keepers of the Western Fire. The keepers of the Eastern Fire were the Mohawks, who were a little bit further over to the east of this nodal point. The reason why the Onondaga is so important, and the reason why their reservation is the only Indian reservation in the central part of New York State, was because the white man did not have permission to wipe these people off the face of the earth. All the tribes that surrounded the Onondaga were wiped out. You don't ever hear about them anymore. As far as we know, they were there, but some of these nations we're not even able to track anymore because they were so completely obliterated. But this nation here was left alone because these people live at this nodal point. And they have tremendous amounts of power. So if you ever get up to Syracuse, New York, take the time and go 20 miles due south of Syracuse, and you run smack into this reservation, Onondaga Reservation. And right there at the border, on the western side of Syracuse, is a lake. No, that's much further. That's much further to the southwest. There's a little lake called Onondaga. Okay, the little lake is called Onondaga, and to the due east of Lake Onondaga is another lake called Oneida, Lake Oneida. And what these crackers used to do is go up there, and they would sit next to this lake with the shamans, and the shamans would teach them about esoteric sciences, geomancy. And because these whiteys like Ben Franklin, you know, when Ben Franklin was running that key up that kite, he wasn't doing that to be funny. He was doing that because he was trying to find out what this was all about. That's what that was really all about. Ben Franklin was into some really weird stuff. And if you ever study the history of the University of Virginia, you'll find out what Jefferson was into also. Jefferson was a very weird character, very strange character. And that's why he was running around raping all those black women, making those black babies. Because he was trying to tap into this stuff too. And he said, well, if I make some black babies, then maybe they can teach me what I need to know. No, that's for real. That ain't no joke. And that's why he had that one sister who was 16 years old. He was knocking up that 16-year-old girl. It was on PBS, right, last year. And he denied to the day that he died that that woman existed. But yet her family is still around. And they're still talking about it. And the U.S. government will not admit that these were the descendants of Thomas Jefferson. But there's a black family in Virginia that can directly trace their roots to that slave girl that Thomas Jefferson was raping and making all them babies off of because he was trying to tap into that science. Same thing with Franklin. When Franklin was running that key up that kite, it was the same deal. It's just that he was a homosexual, so he didn't want to make no family. All he wanted to do was deal with the scientific part of it, okay? But then he was a 33rd degree Mason, too, so he was under special commission to find out these sciences from one angle while Jefferson was going the other route and Washington was going another route, okay? All these so-called founding fathers was running around trying to tap into this stuff because they knew that the commission of Francis Bacon from the 15th century was that if you could not find the esoteric sciences of this place, then you will not survive. That was the commission. So that's what they spent most of their time doing. In Philadelphia, there's a park called Wissahickon. And in Wissahickon Park, there's a rock called Indian Rock. It's a rock about as big as this church. And at that rock, Thomas Jefferson and Franklin and Washington used to sit down with the Leonard Lenape, which we now call the Delaware. And those shamans used to teach them the same sciences, and they taught them how to establish their capital of Philadelphia and why they had to move that capital out of Philadelphia to New York. There's a specific reason why the capital of the United States was moved to New York City after it was in Philadelphia only 10 years. Okay? And there's another very specific esoteric geomantic reason why it was moved out of New York and to Washington, because they had to get close to this line. Philadelphia and New York City are off this line. Washington, D.C. is the closest of those three cities that's located on this line. Baltimore, downtown Baltimore, runs exactly through the middle of this line. And that's why if you ever go to Baltimore, how many people got people in Baltimore? If you ever go to Baltimore, they got a park in Baltimore called Druid. Right, Druid Hill? Druid Hill? Druid Hill. No, it's not called Druid, it's called Druid. It's called Druid. That's a very particular distinction. You got to know that distinction. It's called Druid Hill Park. Okay, and there's a Druid Hill Lake, and there's a Druid Hill Road in Baltimore. All that's very, very particular. They named those places for very specific intentions, because y'all know who these people were, right? Huh? Y'all know who these people were? These were the original European Masons, because they went back about 20,000 years. Even when they was in the caves, these people was here around Stonehenge and Karnak in France and all those esoteric places doing rituals, okay? Because they was trying to tap into these places here. All over this planet, this whole entire planet is straddled by these lines. It's sort of like if you take a basketball, the best way to picture it, take a basketball and take a hair net and drop it over the basketball. That's what this planet really looks like in terms of power. If you're talking about electromagnetic power, then that's the way this planet really looks, okay? And every major civilization on this planet was built in accordance to those grid lines. That's why Washington, D.C. was built where it was at. If you ever get Anthony Browder's book, Anthony Browder talks about why Washington was built where it was built and why the stuff that's in it was built, where it was built. Why was the White House built on 16th Street? Why did they use the number 16? Why was the Washington Monument built a certain amount of feet away from the White House? Okay? Why was the Capitol building built on a triangular axis from the White House and the Washington Monument? All that stuff's in that book. Go get that book, okay? Because he knows that stuff, and if you don't know the stuff, you'll never understand these people's power. You can't break their power, let alone tap into it, unless you know this stuff. You have to know the earth. You have to know your mother. If you don't know your mother, you don't know nothing. You mistreat your mother, you're going to get mistreated. And that's what this is all about. That's what Francis Bacon learned hundreds of years ago. That's what William Penn knew when he went to Pennsylvania and stole all that land from the Indians down there. Okay? When Henry Hudson sailed up the Hudson River, he knew that stuff. He knew that there's nothing he could do unless he started studying these sciences first. And that's what they did. That's why they sent their Masons. Right after they sent them preachers, they sent the Masons. Okay? Along with the preachers came the Masons. Okay? Because the Masons wrote those books. That thing you call the Bible was written by a Mason named Shakespeare. All right? But along this line right here, this state right here is called the Empire State because the Indian shamans at Onondaga told those crackers who was running this place that this was the source of all your power. And when you start your country, you had to start it here because this is the major nodal point that's connected to the Bermuda, what we now know of as the Bermuda Triangle. And all that stuff that happens at the Bermuda Triangle and all those weird movies that you see early hours in the morning, all that stuff happens up here too. Just that you don't read about it unless you dig it out in the library. Okay? You hear about stuff in the Bermuda Triangle. Why do they call it the Devil's Triangle? It's called the Devil's Triangle, right? Why? Anybody know? Right. You don't come back. You don't come back if you hit the wrong point at the wrong time. If you're inside of this grid at a certain time of the year, especially in August, okay, when the vortexes open up wide, okay, or on the full moon or the new moon, when they open up wide, then you're not going to come back. Okay? And that's why they've had all kinds of scientific research missions down inside that triangle trying to figure out, you know, what makes it tick. And that's why, for years, they've had all kinds of scientific stations in places like Cuba. And now Puerto Rico. Arecibo is one of the biggest stations, scientific stations they got in the whole world. Arecibo in Puerto Rico. Okay, because Puerto Rico is only a hop and a skip away from Cuba. And Puerto Rico is right inside that Bermuda Triangle vortex. And so is Cuba. That's why, if you ever, anybody here been in Cuba? If you go, was you in Havana or the eastern part? Okay. Cienfuegos? Oh, Guantanamo? All right. If you go to the easternmost part of Cuba, the easternmost third of Cuba is almost entirely African. It's black. Black as you want to get black. You think you're in Harlem. All right? And there's a reason for that. Because these whiteys who are in Cuba, you know, Cuba is a place where there's a lot of mixed, you know, a lot of mixtures going on. And one of the reasons why these Europeans stay on the western side of Cuba and why Havana is all the way on the western side of that little island is because they can't deal with what's on the eastern side. So they left the Africans over there. The Africans are very comfortable, you know, in places like Cienfuegos on the eastern side because they know that power there. And so this is why Castro, when Castro went up into the Sierra Nevadas and started plotting his little revolution back in the 50s, one of the first things that he did was went to Cienfuegos and he got initiated. He got initiated. And that's why they can't kill him. Paul Robeson made a movie about that called Emperor Jones. He didn't talk about Castro, he talked about the theory. Okay? So this is why I'm saying don't take this stuff for a joke because it's real. Some of these people know. Why is Castro alive after 13 attempts on his life? Okay? If you go to the CIA and ask the CIA why this man's still alive, they can't tell you. They don't know. All they know is they'd like to kill the bastard someday, but they can't get him. Okay? But he knows because he'd been in the East. When he started this revolution, he started it in the East. He didn't start it in Havana. He went to the bush. He went to the shamans first. And he asked those shamans the same thing that Jefferson and Franklin was asking them shamans up there in Onondaga. Okay? He said, help me explain this power. Help me get the power. If you explain the power to me, I can get it. He got the power because he submitted through initiation. Now they can't kill him. All right? The reason why the eastern side of Cuba is so different from the western side of Cuba, why it's almost two completely different countries, dominated by two completely different races, is because the eastern side is closest to the Bermuda Triangle. Okay, it sounds nuts, but it's true. Those shamans will be able to tell you what they know is going on that island. And if you go to Puerto Rico right now, there's all kind of weird, crazy stuff kicking out in Puerto Rico right now because of what's going to be happening over the next 3 years. And I'm going to get to that at the end of the thing. But there's a whole lot of sciences pouring into Puerto Rico right about now because at a place called Arecibo, okay, which is one of the biggest satellite installations in the world, a huge, gigantic dish down there. It's so big they don't even have it propped up on, when you see a satellite dish, it's usually propped up on a diagonal. This thing is so big they built it into the mountain at Arecibo. And they use that dish, a satellite dish, to monitor what's going on inside this triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. Okay? Because they know that there's a direct connection between what's going on in Cuba and the Bermuda Triangle and Puerto Rico and what's going on in New York State. And that's why New York State is the financial capital of America. No coincidence. That's why New York City is the largest city in North America. Okay, it's no coincidence. Because on the real deal, there is no such thing as coincidence. All right? If you know the sciences, you can piece everything together. Anything that seems most distant, you can connect it together with any other point. Because life does not exist in a vacuum and it's not linear. Albert Einstein even proved that time does not operate on a straight line. Time does what? Time does what? He found out just before he died. It's circular. Time bends, which means what? Huh? And if it fluctuates, then that means what? It comes back around, which means what? If its end point is its beginning point, then it means it doesn't exist. That's what Einstein found out before he died, and when he found out that time bends, he tried to burn his records. Because he didn't want the government getting into that, because he found out, he theorized correctly, that if the government found out what he knew about time bending, then they would be able to time travel. So he burned the records, but unfortunately there was another man named Tesla who also had these same identical records, and they killed Tesla to get his records. So therefore, what Einstein tried to hide, they got anyway, and now they're into these grids. They're inside these grids, and that's why they made that movie, Close Encounters of a Third Kind. Ronald Reagan commissioned that movie. And he did it with Spielberg. Spielberg and Reagan met in the White House, and they put that movie together. Because Ronald Reagan said, before I die, somebody's going to tell the truth about what's going on. Okay? Because there's one government called the black government, and then there's the government that you know about. They're two entirely, completely separate governments. There's no connection whatsoever other than the mere coincidence that they exist on the same continent. The black government does whatever it wants, takes whatever money it wants, runs whatever program it wants, right? And all their budgets, all their programming is based on this and this, okay? Because they know the ancient sciences that came from these people here, okay? And their forefathers who came from Africa, all right? Ethiopia and places like that. The further east you go, the heavier the sciences get. That's why Leakey was in East Africa, not West Africa. Because Leakey and his crew understood that you would not find the origins of history. You would not find the beginnings of history in West Africa. Because every single, how many of y'all been to Africa? West Africa? How many of y'all been to East Africa? All right, if you know anything about the difference between East Africa and West Africa, you know right away that there are two different age brackets. You're talking about people in the East who are much, much older than the people in the West. And you'll hear people in the West, the shamans in the West, will even tell you that their fathers came from the East. Okay? Not just Egypt. Not just Egypt. Egypt is late. There's a lot of people talking about Egypt these days. For the last 20 years or so, everybody's been talking about Egypt. Well, forget Egypt. because Egypt is not the point of origin. You got to go south and you got to go east. You got to go as close to the water as you can get to the real deal. And the closest thing you can get to Africa is the Horn in the east. And Ethiopia is at the Horn. Okay, that's why they started all the wars over there, because they didn't want that information coming out of there. Places like Lalibela in Ethiopia, where all those secrets are tied up, where them crackers got ran out of. Okay, when they went over there to raid Somalia, I remember when they went over there, the first thing that came in my head, I said, boy, they stupid. Boy, they stupid. You know why I said that? Because I said, you know, they're going to go over there and they're going to get stuck in a hornet's nest because they don't understand the power of them people. Just like I said, when they sent them to Bosnia, I said, boy, did they mess up. Because they sent them to a source that's going to get them all screwed up. Real good, just like the Gulf. There's a whole lot of us running around in Philadelphia begging people, please don't go over there. Please don't get in that desert. They said, well, we got medication to deal with the sand fleas. That's what they told their people. We got medication that can deal with the scorpions. But they don't have no medication that dealt with them nukes. Okay? And them chemicals that Saddam threw at them and their own people threw at them. Now all 400,000 of them, wait a minute. Before I say that, is anybody here got close people that was in the Gulf? All them people was dying. If you listen to, anybody here got shortwave? If you got shortwave radio and you listen to 49 meter band at night, they'll tell you that those people are dying to the tune of 15,000 already dead. The government's already admitted that there's 6,000 dead now, unofficially. But on the shortwave, which is a real information source, they'll tell you that there's 15,000 dead right now. There's another 45,000 on the critical list, and every single one of them that went over there is going to die. Because they threw bugs at them guys over there that are on the loose over here now, and them bugs are spreading around. Every single soldier that went over there, male or female, officer or private, every single one of them is a walking time bomb. Because every single one of them is overloaded with disease. They're walking rats. And every single one of them is going to die a horrible death, just like them 15,000 died them horrible deaths that you've been hearing little bits and pieces about on the news, only very recently. Okay, because that was nothing but an experimental lab. Just like Bosnia is now, all them people are going to come back and die. So if you got people over there that feel sorry for you, you better pray for them. Same thing. Every water they have from now on, they're going to do the same thing because they're trying to get rid of those people. They're trying to water this country down. If you get into the New World Order concept, which I don't even want to deal with here, you'll understand that they're trying to destroy this country by sending the troops out of here. They can't destroy this country as long as the army is intact. So this is why they invent places like Zaire. And they say, oh, there's a convenient spot. Let's send them over there. Even though they know Ebola's over there. Now, natives can deal with Ebola because they're native. And because those people over there got respect for the forest. But if you're not from there, you better watch out. Even if you're black. Because, see, we condition Western. We have a Western linear thought pattern, and those bugs over there understand that. So if you go over there and you black, it don't matter. If you're Western, you're going to catch that bug. And you're going to bring that bug back here, and you're going to contaminate your children with it. Just like they did in the Gulf. All those little babies coming out with one arm, one eye, one leg, you know, one lung, one kidney, you know, walking on their sides because of them bugs they put over there. And it's a lot of black kids looking just like them little white babies. Okay? And there's not a damn thing they can do about it, excuse my French, because all those people were infected the exact same way, by the exact same source. And that was the United States government operating on a black budget. Okay? And they're going to be sending more and more of these troops here, over there. That's why if you got somebody in a uniform, you better get them out of that uniform. Because sooner or later, they're going to get dispatched somewhere, some ungodly place where there's going to be a bug or a chemical waiting for them or a nuke. All right? And they're not going to come back here the same. That is all part of the plan, Global 2000. And once this country has few enough troops, they're going to put the UN to work. And they're going to wreck this joint. This joint deserves wrecking, but they're going to wreck it. And they're going to wreck it good. They've already started that. That's what Oklahoma City was all about. Ruby Ridge was all about. Okay, Jonestown, all that stuff was tied together. Atlanta child murders, you know, all that stuff is tied together in one big happy scheme, which is designed to break this thing down, and a lot of this stuff has to do with that. Okay, because the Indians have been predicted. If you talk to the Hopi, you talk to the Navajo, you talk to any of those people, even over here in this state, you go up there, up country, upstate, you talk to some of those Mohawks that are left up there, or you go down south to North Carolina, you talk to some of those Cherokees, and they'll be able to tell you, time is up for this country. You don't need Elijah Muhammad to say that. You go talk to these Indians, they'll say the exact same thing. Time is up for the United States of America. You had your little fun. Now the fun's over. Now it's time for you to get what you gave. Okay? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And you scream all you want, but this government and this country is going to come down brick by brick. And if they go screaming into the night, then that's tough. And if you think Western, you're going to go screaming with them, because you're going down with them. That's why you got to get this Western stuff out of your head. Start with the food. Get the Western food out of you. You going to Mickey D's, you're in trouble. How many of y'all go to Mickey